We move on now to Tom Horne and how the new Republican school superintendent wants to change Arizona schools. Horne's an old hand at the job. The 77-year-old lawyer is now in his second stint as school superintendent. Horne last served in the role for 2 terms from 2002 to 2010. Joining us now with 3 things you need to know about Horne's plans is Yana Kunichoff. She's a reporter on the K-12 team at the Arizona Republic. Welcome to Square Off.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So any discussion of what a school superintendent wants to do has to begin with what a school superintendent can actually do. What powers does Tom Horne or any superintendent have to put in place their plans?
Yeah, it's really important to understand that this is a very technical administrative role. The state board and the legislature make policy, but the role of the superintendent is to oversee how that policy plays out on the ground. So Horne has a lot of place to speak about his priorities, but he is not a policymaker.
And much of what the superintendent does is funnel federal dollars to the right place in state schools or districts.
Yep, federal and state money. Yep.
Pretty much. It's kind of really an administrative job. So with that caveat, let's start with the first thing to know about a big shift in policy, Horne's focus on putting police, school resource officers in schools. How and why is he trying to make that happen?
Yeah, Tom Horne has spoken a lot about the need to have officers in schools. I think what happened in Uvalde in Texas has been a big driver for that. He says school safety has to be paramount. The reality is that Arizona schools don't have a lot of extra money. So when Horne says he wants school officers right now, that means a priority on that staff instead of counselors or social workers.
And that money is awarded to schools through grants. There's a whole grant process they can apply for, and he's using that as the tool to sort of enforce this policy.
Yeah, it's a competitive state grant, and what the superintendent has said right now is that he will not recommend any schools who ask for a counselor or social worker and don't already have a school resource officer on campus. So he's very much prioritizing within the range of his power those staff positions.
And so to be clear, he's denying school counselors and social workers and instead wanting cops in schools in their place. Many schools don't want school resource officers. That battle's been going on for a few years now. What's the reaction?
Yeah, I mean, there's been decades now of efforts at the school level to move away from punitive school discipline and from having police officers who might mean that students are more likely to be funneled into the criminal justice system. Schools do want more staff, but they want staff that will help with students, especially after COVID, who are struggling with their emotions, who are struggling with adjustment back to school.
So is this something Tom Horne can do on his own, just deny grants to this school and award grants to that school?
I think it's an interesting example of where his power lays. So he can decide who gets recommended to the state board, and so it's not clear whether the state board would see schools that he denies a recommendation to.
And that's the state.
So in this case,
the State Board of Education.
The State Board of Education.
Which we're going to be paying a lot more attention to this year versus past year. On to number 2, another policy shift. Horne staff took down a Department of Education webpage with resources for social emotional learning. He wants schools instead to enforce discipline. Explain what's going on there.
Yeah, so social emotional learning generally is an idea about how that students need to have emotional regulation to be able to learn. Tom Horne has said that that's actually a Trojan horse for critical race theory. So he's come with like a really ideological analysis of this. There's hundreds of schools all over the state. It's not clear how he'll remove that from schools, but he is going to have a director of character education who will be, kind of training teachers on a different set of values. He's also talked about having a hotline, a critical race theory hotline for people to report teachers. So again, school boards of districts make policy of what schools learn. But he can create a lot of tension around what's happening in school.
So he sounds like he can create an environment without enforcing an actual policy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he can train teachers, he can have folks come at the district or school level, but he can't change the policy of what schools are learning.
And so for many school districts, they've been having a different kind of conversation about things like discipline.
Yeah, I mean, I think that.
So this really does. How will this affect that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the general effort right now has really been to move away from suspensions, to move away from detention, that advocates say remove students from classes is a punitive response to issues that might have deeper roots. So they think that counselors, that social workers, those staff members can address those roots. But Arizona has one of the worst student to counselor ratios in the nation. So there's usually, I think, about one counselor for 700 students. So that's also not a very effective ratio for those staff members, even if there's one in a school to help students.
Okay, and the third thing to know, Horne wants to overhaul English language learning in the classroom. This is a long-running battle, debate in Arizona. What does he want to do?
So right now, Horne wants to return Arizona schools to English immersion learning, which means that students would have to sit in classes where they're only learning in English rather than bilingual learning, which is now considered sort of the best practice around how students learn a new language. Again, sort of an open question where he has the power to do that. There's a lot of laws already on the books, but since 2019, schools have more flexibility in how to do that. So right now he says he's going to train teachers in how to teach English, but sort of where the rubber meets the road on that, we've yet to see.
Okay, I'm going to end by putting you on the spot. Where do you think, given what we've said about a school superintendent's powers, he can have the most impact?
I mean, we haven't talked about the Empowerment Scholarship Account program. That is ideologically, I think Horne is very much in favor of that program, but it is a massive administrative undertaking. So I think that he can have a lot of impact on what that program looks like.
And he's the first superintendent administering the universal program, and he's brought in some big supporters of school vouchers to help him do it. Got to end it there. Yana Kunichoff of the Arizona Republic, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.